Hi and welcome to the Mixed Reality Toolkit Guide to Input Actions and Controller Mapping, your one-stop guide to make sure you get all your input managed in the correct way. So one big thing that's different within the whole Mixed Reality Toolkit is that we have a concept of input actions, and what these effectively are, these are separation from your physical input, your controller, your button, your anything else you're going to do with a physical device, and then something you're going to want to do in your project. So you're going to want to lift something, click on something, make something jump, keeping the two of these things very separate, simply because that the device, the inputs things can change radically based upon what you want to do, but those things in your project are fairly static. You don't change at runtime what things do. So we'll have a quick overview of what are actions and all the different things that are related to input actions. We'll go through creating some of them, start adding some also rules, because we can have additional actions that fire off another action, which might sound strange. How to map actions from the physical into your actual input, and then a very quick overview of sort of consuming actions. So we're not really going to cover the whole input system all in different interactions, or one of the most requested things on Stack Overflow is how do I click on something, but let's get on and get into this thing. So obviously out of the whole framework here, again we're focusing just on configuration and what that means and how to get you started on your project quickly. If you've not done already, I'd recommend watching the previous videos around configuration. Input actions. Also, this is a profile that's available within the Mixed Reality Toolkit. You can access it from the Mixed Reality Toolkit in the menu in the editor by selecting Mixed Reality Toolkit, Input Settings, Input Action Profile. You can either create your own, or as we've shown in previous videos, navigate through to it where it's stored, which is also in the same place. When we looked at the whole process of consuming input from different devices, traditionally there's been several different ways, and it's always been viewed as a very simple thing to get to your project. But then when you start to look at more cross-platform, multi-device, multidisciplinary inputs for different consoles and platforms, it starts to get a bit tricky. So we start with the basic process that, we want to hit space, we want the character to jump. So what we'll do is we'll listen for the space key. Seen 100 different times in 100 different ways in different Unity projects. The trick here then is that if I suddenly decide to add another platform, so I want a joystick to also do it, then I need to have fixed in my code listening for space and for that specific joystick button. But bear in mind that different joysticks are mapped different ways for different systems and different platforms, and that can get very hard to control. This is where things like some of the input assets that are on the store have sort of driven away to try and help manage that mess of configuration. Unity's own solution for doing this with its input mappings doesn't really help, because it requires you to hard code your input at design time. If you then want to have someone with another controller come on board, or if you wanted to change pattern, what you ended up with was hundreds of these little mappings. Yes, the code became simpler because we were going against a string definition of what I wanted something to do, and then I simply put wherever I want configured into it. But if you wanted multiple different platforms, multiple different ways, for instance having an Xbox 360 controller and an old gamepad controller, they had different buttons. So this didn't really help. We could only build it one way or the other, or have hundreds of these different things and then different actions required. It got complicated, and this is why assets became the only real way to drive input forward in a proper project if you're going to go forward. Now when we come to the Mixed Reality Toolkit, we've taken a wholly different approach to how to manage input. And one of the most interesting things that's come to light when we're talking to other vendors and other teams who've been looking at input, they've all had fairly similar ideas, although we've gone to sort of the nth degree to make this really fluid. So the first part is that we take apart and break apart what are the physical devices, so all the different things that you can bring into your solution: gamepads, pointers, mouse pens, Oculus Touch controllers, hands, coming later. The physical, from what you actually need to do in your game. So your game doesn't necessarily need to know a specific control is used in a specific way. All it needs to know is, has someone told me to jump? Has someone told me to, when I select on this object in my scene, to do something with it if I've asked it to do a certain thing? So the grab action, or in some cases like the paint action, and am I doing different things for different buttons, or am I taking different conditions into account when I'm doing this? So these things are completely separated. And then the middle bit between this is that we map them. So we say, for this device, it will do these things. And then I can switch and change those, and even more dynamically, in a specific scene, if I want to change the input, so my motion controller now, instead of being a point and click interface, is now a racing controller. And turning will actually turn the driving wheel and things like that, and just swapping it out at runtime. Not changing the things I'm doing in my project, but just changing how the input works. So we can have this level of runtime configuration for switching and changing it out without breaking the whole solution. And ultimately, because this is the Mixed Reality Toolkit, everything's customizable. You go the way you want. If you want extra things and do more stuff, feel free. The whole framework is designed to make sure that you can extend it without breaking the core framework as much as you like, and it will still just work. So how's this look? So we have several different components here. So we have physical input coming in, it gets mapped, and then we have this list of actual actions I want to do in my project. So I want to grab something, I want to hold something, I want to have a slider for doing something, or whatever it is your heart desires in this project, whether it's a game, it's an enterprise solution. We just need the list of things you want to happen. Now this list is fixed. It's one of the few things in the framework that's fixed. So at design time, you decide what your project can do. You know, as many as you like. And you'll notice here as well is that we constrain these actions based upon the type of input we expect. So is it a button? So we have select here as a digital, so it's like a button. We've got pointer and grip poses. So we expect directional and rotational data to come with that action. Is it a trigger where we actually have a float, we have a range of a value that's coming through, or is it like a dual access where there's an X and a Y value that's coming from it? This helps to ensure that only the correct type of device can map to the correct type of action for the specific type of data it's going to get. So you couldn't have a button going off into a dual access device because that wouldn't make sense. You're expecting two values, but you're only getting one. So actions are fixed, you define how you want to work, as many as you like. Again, they can even have the same names, because one key thing we have different from the way that Unity's done it in the past and is currently doing it at the time of recording in their new input system, they all use strings. Now strings are terrible when it comes to lookup and you're trying to have high performance or trying to do these things. So all of these things have a specific system generated ID in the background, which is again why it's design time only. This is a single entity in your entire project, never to be duplicated. So all the rest of the system can map to it like lightning. Now when we come to actually do the controller itself, yes, we got a bit jazzy and a bit fluid. Not every controller has this nice graphical design, but we'd hope to get that eventually. But effectively, you have is that we know a device. We know the kind of things we've picked it up, we've looked at it, we've waved it about, and we know all the different types of inputs they've got, because granted, the vendors tell us what these things do. So as you can see here from a Windows Mixed Reality controller, this is showing the left-hand one. Obviously, you've got the right hand as well. But you've got a trigger, you've got a D-pad, or touch, which is a touchpad. You've got a thumbstick, we've got a system button, Windows button, grip button, you name it. But we've listed all of these. And then next to these, you simply tell it by mapping what you want each one of these things to do. Now you can, again, if you want a different version of this for a different part of your project or game, just create a new profile. And then when you need it, you swap it out. But we'll go into more of that a bit later. But here you can see, simply map them out of what you want. And when you drop down these lists, I'm going to show this in the demo, you'll only be able to select those things which match the type of data that comes from that specific button or controller. So when we put all this together, then in your project, we have input coming in, it gets mapped. When these things happen, it generates an action, and then in code, or if you want to use the rest of the SDK components that come with it, this is what effectively happens, is that we have an event that comes out. You say what kind of action it is you're listening for, and if that action is what has just happened, do something. It's quick, simple, easy to use. Like the whole of Toolkit, we have a lot of interfaces around here and a lot of scripts around it. And I'm not going to go too much in depth from the script input perspective because that's a whole other topic in itself. So this is just a very taster of what is to come. But a lot of the SD components have all these things built in, so you can do different things. Now, the question arises, as often did, is that I've got a D-pad. Okay, so I'm going to get an X and a Y value from pressing that D-pad from the device, which pressing the number and then selecting one of these, I'm going to get an X, Y value, something else. But what if I want to have a D-pad up, a D-pad down, left, right, northwest, southwest, south-southwest, however many variants I want to have? You couldn't really do this in code, or you'd have miles of code and have to duplicate it everywhere. So this is where we created what we refer to as input rules, or input action rules to be more specific. We had a lot of debate about these, and effectively what this allows you to do at, again, design time, you can say, well, I'm going to get an action from my D-pad. Now, when I press the D-pad in a specific direction, I also want it to generate another action. That allows you as the code developer to either listen for the original action that came in, or the translated action as interpreted by what you've set it to do. Again, most likely this is mostly for D-pad actions, or you could have a trigger where if you're only pressing it halfway or you're pressing it all the way, and you might activate something else because it's like you're pushing too hard and things like this. Do what you wish. And this allows you to have different actions off a starting initial action. And the data you have available is the data around that type of data. So a D-pad is a dual axis control. I'm going to get X and a Y. So here I'm saying, right, fine. If I have an X of -1 and Y of 0, I'm obviously pushing left on the D-pad. So generate a jump left action, or a menu left, or whichever way you want to do. The world is your oyster, and again, as many of these as you like. The system's been tuned to be extremely performed around all of these. The only thing you can't do is duplicate within the same process. So if I've got a direction of a D-pad for X -1, Y 0, I can't have another one doing that. So I can't do multiple actions from the same action, because all you're doing is duplicating code, duplicating functions. You have the action to do what it is, and so on. So play with it, tweak it, do what you like with it, and see what you can actually get out of it. But let's have a quick demonstration now of exactly where we can get to. So switch over to Unity. You can see here I'm using the Unity 3D with extras scene. As I've used in previous videos, this just gives a bit of extra visual flair and something to actually look at. It also means I can do construction work in the virtual realm without destroying my actual house. And all we're simply going to do here is going to go walk through creating some actions. I'm going to map those actions to a controller, play around with the rules just to see what they look like, and then I'm going to go into the scene, add a script, click on this table and do the magic trick of making the hat disappear. It's a very simple example, just keep things going. So you can see here I've already got the Mixed Reality Toolkit installed, and I've also got my default configuration, so we can start customizing this. So let's copy over the main config, and then I'm going to create a new input system profile. As you can see here, I'm using the new release candidate configuration screens, and I can actually now clone and change the name of it, and also select which profiles under that I might also want to copy as well. So I'm going to call it my system configuration. Yes, my OCD will not let me spell it wrong. Clone that. Then I'm going to come down here, I'm going to create some new input actions so I can customize them. So you can see here the Mixed Reality Toolkit gives you a wide selection of actions already predefined. You probably want to create your own or select these and customize it. It can be, again, it's up to you. These obviously change by your project, so these are things that can happen in your project or in your game, things that you want to be able to recognize and do, and using friendly names to identify them all. If I go and try and add a new action here, I can give it a nice name of what I want. My action And then also you then need to select what kind of data it is you expect this action to work with. Whether it's a digital, so a button, single axis, so it's like a trigger or float, dual axis like a dual D-pad, or 3DOF or 6DOF data. And then this action will only appear on when configuring the controllers as to the type of input that can present that data, and then only be consumed in your project with the kind of data you expect. Very simple, nice and easy. So now we go back. Now that we've actually got our data, we then want to go and map it to one of our controllers. So I'm going to go and select a controller at random, so the right mixed reality controller, because that just happens to be what I've got to hand. So I have the controller here, we can see all the different actions, the different inputs available, and the actions that are currently defined against them. And I can go and select one. So if I got my touchpad thumbstick position, you can see my new dual axis action is also there for selection, as well as the existing teleport ones. And I can configure this how I like for the particular use that it could be, whether it's for the entire project or whether having different mappings per different scenes. And you configure these once. So once you configure the controller, whichever platforms use that controller, they will recognize the same config. So the same configuration I use now in Windows Mixed Reality will also work within OpenVR or OpenXR, wherever this particular type of controller is used. Same for the Oculus Rift or Vive or any other like hand tracking or whatever else you go on. Configure it once, it uses it wherever that's available, no matter what the input device is. This is the type of input I want through my project. Now once that's mapped, obviously another option we still have is that we can actually configure rules. And these rules allow us to say, well, if when I receive this action, then I also want, depending on the data, this action to also be fired. So if I select my action, and because it's a dual axis, I've got X and Y data from that, then as we showed in the presentation, so I can say 1 and 0.5 if I so wished. And now when that occurs, I want a different action to occur. Now one key thing here is that the actions are paired. So if you have an input action of a dual axis, then the resultant rule action also has to be a dual axis. The data has to match because it's flowing through the same data in the same way. You can't have, say, a dual axis cause a button action. You simply have to know that when you receive this supplementary action, it's working the way you want it. So if you're having a D-pad, you're having a D-pad up is going to be received with X of 0, Y of 1. And that's what you're going to get. All you really care about is this thing happened. So keen to remember, it's all paired. So I'm going to keep with the defaults here with everything that's set up. And what I've done here as an example is that I've got my workbench. I've created a collider on it. If you remember from the previous videos, you need a collider for any kind of interactions to happen because the input system all hangs off the colliders and everything gets paired together. And then I've got my input script here where I can select an action and something else. So if I switch to and look at this, you can see here that I've got my input action script, which inherits from the base input handler. This handles things like focus. It also handles the model behavior or the construction destruction, and also registering this script and the object this is attached to with the input system itself. This is important because that's how the input system knows you want to receive events and how you want to see them. In the old Holo Toolkit, this was done for you by different scripts in different places and different objects. But now within the Mixed Reality Toolkit, it's all in one place, so that you can know exactly what's registered, how it's going to work, and what's happening with it. If you wish, you can extend or change this, completely up to you. We simply give an action of how to do things. In a future video, we'll go into this in a bit more detail of what all these different things really mean. We also have like a pointer handle here, so I'm registering to listen for things that happen to pointers. So that's the pointers that come out of the controllers and how they work. I get these different events that come from pointers. So here I've got the on pointer clicked event, and when it clicks, I'm going to get an event, and in that event, I'm going to listen. I'm going to look at the action that the event has occurred from. So that's which button I pressed on the controller when the pointer click event happened, and then if the action from the event may meet the criteria of the action we've configured, then do what it is you need to do. So in this case, we're going to hide whatever's on here, which is going to be the hard hat. So if we switch back to Unity, we've got everything set up. So I've selected the select action, which is just nice and easy. It could be any of these actions that are needed. And then I've also selected the safety hat, and then by magic, if everything works and I've made sure that the demo gods have been appeased, if I go and run this now, I'm now going to don my mixed reality headset. And there you can see the scene working. I grab my controller and watch it appear in the scene. Ta-da! And then there's my workbench, and if I go and point to my workbench and click, you can see that the hard hat has now disappeared. There's my magic trick done. Unfortunately, I can't make it come back because unfortunately there's nothing in the script to make it come back. I also can't make anything else disappear, but there we go. There, quick, short demonstration of input actions in action, as it were. And that's it. That's the end of this simple demonstration. We've shown you what input actions are, how to configure them. They're related to your project and how they will build and what they're going to do in the project. We've got the input action rules, so if you want to take one action and make many based upon the conditions of that action. And also shown you how to then configure the controllers to fire those actions. And then you can configure whichever controls you want in whichever way you need it to do for your project or scene. Simples. Not going into too much in depth about the input system because that is a whole other subject which we'll cover in a future video. So I hope you found this introduction to the input actions useful, and I wish you well on your mixed reality projects.